Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today, because a lot of people think love happens by accident. They think somebody just wakes up one day and says, "Oh my God, I'm crazy in love." No, no, no. That kind of love don't just fall out the sky. That kind of love is created. And if somebody is crazy in love with you right now, it's because of some things you did, maybe without even realizing it. Let me slow this thing down, confirm you something powerful, because most people don't understand this part at all. You made them feel emotionally safe without chasing them, and that right there is rare. Everybody wants love, but very few people know how to create an environment where love can actually grow. You didn't interrogate them every time they got quiet. You didn't assume the worst when they needed space. You didn't turn every pause into a problem. You allowed them room to breathe, and breathing room is where attachment forms. See, when a person feels like they can be themselves around you, not perform, not pretend, not impress, something shifts inside them. They stop bracing for judgment. They stop protecting every emotion. They stop wearing armor. And once that armor comes off, feelings start showing up uninvited. You didn't force vulnerability out of them. You earned it by being calm, patient, and emotionally mature. You also understood something most people miss. Chasing doesn't create love, it creates pressure. And pressure makes people pull away. But you didn't chase. You didn't blow up their phone. You didn't demand reassurance every 5 minutes. You trusted the connection enough to let it unfold naturally. And that trust told them, I'm safe with this person. Safety is attractive. Safety is addictive. You listened without trying to fix everything. When they opened up, you didn't interrupt. You didn't minimize their feelings. You didn't turn the conversation back to yourself. You made them feel heard. And when someone feels heard, they feel understood. And when someone feels understood, they feel connected. That connection hits deeper than looks, money, or charm. You didn't punish them for honesty. A lot of people say they want the truth, but they react so badly that nobody wants to be real with them. You didn't do that. When they told you how they felt, even when it wasn't perfect, you handled it with grace. That told them they could be real without losing you. And that kind of emotional safety creates loyalty. You stayed steady. Your mood didn't swing based on their behavior. You didn't make them responsible for your happiness. You came into the situation whole, not empty. And when someone feels like they're with a person who is emotionally stable, it calms their nervous system. Calm turns into comfort. Comfort turns into attachment. Attachment turns into love. Without even realizing it, you became their peace. Not their drama, not their stress, their peace. And once someone associates you with peace, they crave you. They start missing you when you're not around. They start thinking about you without trying to. They start imagining a future with you because you feel like home, not chaos. That's why they fell so hard. Not because you chased them. Not because you forced anything. But because you made love feel safe. Let me tell you why respecting yourself changed everything. You didn't announce it. You didn't give a speech about your standards. You didn't demand respect with your mouth. You showed it with your behavior. And behavior is the loudest language there is. You didn't tolerate inconsistency. You didn't accept half effort. You didn't excuse disrespect just to keep someone around. You quietly drew the line and stood on it. See, when you respect yourself, you stop negotiating your worth. You don't over-explain why you deserve basic kindness. You don't argue someone into valuing you. You simply remove yourself from situations that don't align with who you are. And that kind of self-respect does something powerful. It forces people to either rise up or step aside. There's no middle ground. You didn't fear being alone more than being mistreated. That's where most people lose themselves. They stay too long, accept too little, and then wonder why the other person stopped trying. But you didn't do that. You showed them that access to you is a privilege, not a guarantee. And once someone realizes they could lose you, they start paying attention. You didn't chase approval. You didn't shift into whoever they wanted you to be. You stayed authentic. You said no when something didn't feel right. You spoke up when something crossed the line. And that consistency between your words and your actions built credibility. People don't fall in love with pushovers. They fall in love with people who know who they are. You also noticed how they responded to your boundaries. When someone truly cares, boundaries don't scare them. They clarify the relationship. You didn't apologize for having limits. You didn't feel guilty for protecting your peace. You understood that love without respect is just attachment, and you weren't interested in that. Your self-respect made you unpredictable in the best way. They couldn't manipulate you. They couldn't test you and get the same weak response. You didn't argue, beg, or plead. You observed, adjusted, and if needed, you walked away emotionally before you ever had to leave physically. That maturity hit them hard. Because here's the truth. When you respect yourself, you teach others how to treat you. You become a mirror. And what they saw reflected back was strength, dignity, and self-worth. That made them nervous. That made them curious. That made them want to step up because losing you felt like losing something valuable. Without saying a word, you showed them that love with you comes with standards. And once someone experiences that level of self-respect, they don't just admire you, they fall for you. Let me explain why the way you appreciated them went straight to their heart. You didn't flatter them with empty words, and you didn't overpraise them until it felt fake. What you did was notice. You noticed the effort. You noticed the intention. You noticed the growth. And when a person feels genuinely noticed, something inside them softens. You didn't make appreciation loud or performative. You didn't compare them to anyone else. You didn't use compliments as currency to control them. You spoke from a place of truth. When you said thank you, it meant something. When you acknowledged them, it wasn't because you needed something back. And that sincerity made your words land deeper. You appreciated them without shrinking yourself. That's the part most people get wrong. You didn't abandon your own needs just to make them feel special. You didn't disappear trying to prove your loyalty. You stayed whole. You stayed grounded. And because you didn't lose yourself, your appreciation felt balanced, not desperate. Balanced love feels safe. You allowed them to feel capable. Instead of correcting everything or taking over, you trusted them. You let them show up for you. You let them feel useful, needed, and valued. And let me tell you something, when a person feels like they matter in your life, they start attaching their identity to the relationship. That's powerful. You didn't weaponize appreciation. You didn't say, I did this for you, so now you owe me. You didn't keep score. You didn't throw your kindness back in their face during arguments. That showed emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is attractive because it creates stability. You also knew when to speak appreciation and when to stay quiet. You didn't force reassurance out of them, and you didn't flood them with praise during moments when they needed space. You read the room. That emotional intelligence told them you were tuned in, not just present. You celebrated who they were becoming, not just who they already were. You saw potential without pressuring them to change. That made them feel supported instead of judged. And when someone feels supported, they grow closer, not farther away. Your appreciation wasn't about attachment. It was about connection. You didn't need them to complete you. You chose them because they added value to your life. And people can feel that difference. They can feel when they're wanted, not needed. That's why your appreciation worked, because it came from strength, not fear. And when appreciation comes from strength, it creates respect. And respect always deepens love. Let me tell you why consistency changed the entire game for you. You didn't show up one day full of affection and disappear the next. You didn't confuse them with mixed signals. You didn't make them guess where they stood with you. What they experienced from you was steady, predictable energy, and in a world full of emotional chaos, that feels like relief. You said what you meant and meant what you said. Your actions matched your words. When you promised something, you followed through. When you cared, you showed it in small, repeatable ways. And those small, repeatable moments built trust. Trust doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from reliability. You didn't use inconsistency as a tactic. You didn't pull away to get attention. You didn't go silent to provoke anxiety. You didn't play games to feel powerful. You understood that manipulation might create obsession, but consistency creates security. And security is what turns feelings into commitment. Your emotional tone stayed grounded. You didn't let every mood swing dictate how you treated them. You didn't punish them with distance when you were upset. You handled conflict without disappearing. That showed emotional control. And emotional control makes people feel safe enough to invest deeply. They learned that when they came to you, they'd get the same version of you, honest, calm, present. That reliability calmed their nervous system. When someone stops bracing for emotional whiplash, they relax. And when they relax, they attach. You didn't rush intimacy, but you didn't withhold it either. You gave affection in a measured, authentic way. Not to manipulate, not to test, just because it was real. That balance made them trust the connection instead of questioning it. Over time, your consistency became your signature. They didn't have to wonder if you cared. They didn't have to decode your behavior. They didn't have to overthink. And that mental peace is addictive. People fall in love with the person who makes their life feel simpler, not harder. You became dependable. And dependability builds emotional weight. When someone knows you'll show up, they start planning around you. They start factoring you into their future. They start seeing you as stable ground. Without realizing it, your consistency made you irreplaceable, because inconsistency can be found anywhere. But someone who shows up the same way, with integrity and warmth, is rare. And once someone experiences that, they don't want to lose it. That's how staying consistent quietly pulled them all the way in. Let me tell you why allowing them to invest is what made their feelings deepen in a way they didn't expect. You didn't rush in trying to prove your worth. You didn't overgive to secure their attention. You didn't carry the entire emotional load of the connection by yourself. Instead, you left space. And that space invited them to step forward. You understood something powerful: effort creates attachment. When a person puts time, energy, and intention into someone, their mind starts justifying that effort. They begin to think, this matters to me. You let that process happen naturally. You didn't rob them of the chance to earn their place in your life. You didn't solve every problem for them. You didn't always make the first move. You didn't always reach out first. You allowed silence to exist without panic. And in that silence, they felt the pull toward you. Because when someone has to initiate, to plan, to show up, they emotionally invest. You received instead of resisting. A lot of people block love because they don't know how to receive. But you allowed compliments. You allowed care. You allowed effort. You didn't brush it off or downplay it. You let them feel good about giving to you. And when someone feels good about giving, they want to keep giving. You didn't guilt them into effort. You didn't say, if you loved me, you would. You trusted that if they wanted to show up, they would. And that trust challenged them. It made them want to rise to the occasion instead of feeling forced. You allowed imbalance to correct itself naturally. When they leaned in, you matched their energy. When they pulled back, you didn't chase, you observed. That balance communicated strength. It told them you weren't desperate, but you were present. That combination is magnetic. You also allowed them to feel responsible for the connection, not burdened, responsible. There's a difference. You let them see that their actions had impact. When they showed up, the connection grew. When they didn't, they felt the distance. That cause and effect taught them the value of consistency. Over time, their investment became emotional ownership. They started protecting the relationship because it felt like something they helped build. People don't easily walk away from what they've contributed to. The more they invested, the harder it became to imagine life without you. You didn't manipulate them into investing. You didn't create fear or jealousy. You simply allowed reality to do the work, and reality teaches lessons better than words ever could. By letting them invest, you flipped the script. Instead of asking for love, you became someone worth loving. And once someone realizes they've put their heart into you, that realization turns into deep attachment. That's how their love grew stronger without you ever having to force it. Let me tell you why walking away from disrespect without fear is the most powerful thing you ever did, even if it didn't feel powerful at the time. You didn't make a scene. You didn't explode with anger. You didn't beg someone to treat you right. You simply decided that certain behavior no longer had access to you. And that quiet decision shifted everything. See, most people stay too long in situations that drain them because they're afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of losing someone they care about. But you weren't ruled by that fear. You understood that loneliness is temporary, but disrespect changes how you see yourself. And you chose yourself. You didn't threaten to leave every time something went wrong. You didn't use walking away as manipulation. You observed patterns. You gave space for correction. And when you realized the behavior wasn't changing, you removed yourself emotionally before you ever removed yourself physically. That's maturity. That's strength. You stopped explaining your worth to someone who already knew better. You stopped arguing your way into basic respect. You stopped tolerating crumbs while offering a full meal. And that silence, that calm withdrawal, spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. Because when you stopped reacting, they started reflecting. Walking away wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. You protected your peace. You protected your standards. You protected the version of yourself you worked hard to become. And when someone realizes they no longer have access to you the way they used to, it creates shock. Not because they don't care, but because they assumed you'd always be there no matter what. You didn't chase closure. You didn't demand explanations. You accepted that some people understand the consequences of their actions only after access is removed. And that acceptance showed emotional independence. Emotional independence is intimidating to someone who relies on control. You also didn't carry resentment with you. You walked away clean. No revenge, no bitterness, just clarity. And clarity is powerful because it leaves no room for confusion. They knew exactly why you pulled back, not because you said it, but because their behavior led them there. Here's the part people don't talk about. When you walk away from disrespect, it forces the other person to sit with themselves. There's no argument to hide behind, no chaos to distract them, just the mirror. And that mirror shows them what they lost, not someone dramatic, not someone needy, but someone solid, patient, and self-respecting. You didn't try to prove your value after leaving. You didn't post indirect messages. You didn't seek validation. You kept living, and living well without them is the loudest statement you can ever make. It tells them your happiness was never dependent on their behavior. Walking away also rewired how they saw you. Before, they may have thought you'd tolerate anything, but now you became the one that got away, the one they underestimated, the one whose absence felt heavier than their presence ever did. You taught them a lesson without trying to teach a lesson. You showed them that love doesn't mean endurance, that commitment doesn't mean self-betrayal, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. And even if they never came back, you still won because you didn't lose yourself trying to keep someone who wasn't ready to treat you right. But if they did come back, they came back changed, more aware, more careful, more intentional, because they understood one thing clearly: access to you is earned, not guaranteed. That's why this final step sealed everything. Not because you wanted power, but because you chose peace. And peace makes you unforgettable.